Breaking right now, Iran is burning, police stations are under attack, commanders have been shot dead, and the regime is preparing to shut down the internet nationwide. We have now entered the 12th day of the uprising, and the situation inside Iran has officially spiraled out of control. What began as scattered demonstrations has transformed into something far more dangerous for the regime. This is no longer limited to chants in the streets or symbolic protests. Police stations are coming under attack, commanders are being gunned down in broad daylight, and regime flags are being burned openly in city squares. As the Ayatollah prepares to pull the plug on the internet in a desperate attempt to regain control, the United States has sent a clear and unmistakable warning to Tehran: stop the killing, or we will stop you. This is the latest picture emerging from the ground, and it is escalating fast. More cities are joining the uprising with every passing hour. Over the last 24 hours alone, both the number and the size of protests have increased sharply across the country. Footage pouring out of Iran shows crowds growing larger, more determined, and more confrontational. One clip that has gone viral on Iranian social media shows a female protester with a bloodied face standing her ground and chanting that she is no longer afraid. Scenes like this are becoming rallying cries. They are pulling more people into the streets, convincing ordinary Iranians that the moment for change has finally arrived. What makes this uprising different from previous waves of unrest is its structure. Unlike earlier protests that were concentrated in major urban centers and could be isolated, this movement is decentralized and geographically dispersed. Small towns and mid-sized cities are now doing much of the heavy lifting. That dispersion makes it far more difficult for the regime to deploy its usual tactics of containment and suppression. As protests expand across dozens of locations simultaneously, the dictatorship faces a logistical nightmare, stretching its security forces thinner with each passing day. Political scientists are now paying close attention to participation levels. According to multiple reports, the protests may be approaching what is known as the critical 4% threshold. This number may sound insignificant at first, but in a country of roughly 90 million people, 4% represents around 3.6 million individuals actively protesting. History shows that when sustained participation reaches this level, authoritarian regimes begin to crack. Even the most repressive governments struggle to survive when millions of citizens openly defy them at the same time. Of course, there is an important disclaimer. Verifying exact numbers inside Iran is nearly impossible. The regime is opaque by design, and information is deliberately restricted. But despite that, we are seeing an increasing number of reports and videos showing security forces overwhelmed in multiple cities. In many of these clips, protesters are confronting armed units with nothing more than rocks. And shockingly, in several cases, the rocks are winning. Security forces are retreating, abandoning positions, and in some instances, fleeing entire neighborhoods or cities. Because of this, reports are emerging that several major cities may already be slipping out of regime control. One particularly striking claim suggests that Iran's second-largest city, Mashhad, home to roughly 4 million people, is nearing liberation as protesters gain ground. One of the most symbolic moments of the uprising came from this city, where footage showed protesters tearing down and destroying the Islamic Republic's flag in the city center. In another video from the same area, demonstrators set fire to a bus belonging to the IRGC's paramilitary volunteer force, the very organization the Ayatollah relies on to crush dissent. The unrest did not stop there. Additional footage shows protesters attacking and burning religious schools. For many Iranians, these institutions are not just places of worship or education, but extensions of the state itself. As Iran is a theocracy, these schools are widely seen as tools used to indoctrinate future generations and maintain ideological control. Their destruction carries immense symbolic weight. Perhaps even more alarming for the regime is the fact that some religious figures have now turned against it. Clerics have begun publicly condemning the government and calling for the overthrow of the Ayatollah. In one widely shared video, a cleric denounces the regime as murderous and criminal, urging the people to rise up and dismantle the system entirely. When voices from within the religious establishment begin to defect, it signals a deep fracture in the ideological foundation of the state. The dramatic shift in public sentiment is also visible in how Iranians are treating symbols of the regime's power. Protesters have been tearing down statues of Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC commander assassinated by a US drone strike. This is a stunning reversal. When Soleimani was killed, massive state-orchestrated funerals drew huge crowds, with people crying, chanting, and praising him as a national hero. Today, those same statues are being pulled down and defaced, highlighting just how profoundly the national mood has changed. One of the most significant flashpoints has been the city of Karaj, a major industrial hub west of Tehran with a population of around 1.5 million. Reports suggest the city may have been partially liberated, making it the largest urban center to fall out of firm regime control so far. Karaj's strategic importance cannot be overstated. It is a key transportation link between Tehran and the Caspian Sea. That said, information remains fragmented. Some reports indicate that fighting is still ongoing, and footage circulating online may not reflect the current situation. What is clear is that the scale of confrontation there is unprecedented. Then came one of the most shocking developments yet. In the city of Zahedan, footage surfaced showing a police commander being gunned down in broad daylight. The attack was carried out by an Iranian Baloch militant group, which released the video themselves. While the footage cannot be shown publicly, reports describe a chilling scene resembling something out of a crime series rather than real life. This was not a spontaneous clash, it was a targeted assassination, signaling that parts of the uprising are becoming militarized. As dramatic as the street-level violence is, the real danger may lie in what the regime is preparing next. The 12th day carries deep symbolic weight. The Israeli-Iranian conflict last year lasted exactly 12 days, a war that shattered the regime's carefully constructed image of strength. Many Iranians realized during that conflict that their military could not stand up to Israel, undermining one of the core pillars of the regime's legitimacy. Now, reports suggest the government is preparing for a full-scale internet blackout timed to this symbolic moment. A message from the son of Iran's former Shah underscores the tension. He warned that the regime is terrified and once again preparing to cut off communications. However, he also pointed out that Iran's communication networks are no longer entirely under state control. Thousands of Starlink terminals, smuggled into the country despite being illegal, provide satellite internet that bypasses government infrastructure. Even if the regime shuts down traditional networks, communication may continue through alternative channels and international broadcasts. Iran's history offers a grim precedent. Over the past several decades, numerous protest movements have risen and fallen. Each time, the regime survived through extreme brutality. Internet blackouts were followed by mass arrests and deadly crackdowns. Supporters of the theocracy, combined with ruthless security tactics, allowed the Ayatollah to maintain control. That possibility cannot be ignored this time either. Yet there are crucial differences now. The first is technology. Shutting down the internet is far harder in an era of satellite connectivity. The second, and far more significant factor, is the United States. Over the past 2 weeks, President Trump has issued repeated warnings that mass killings of protesters will trigger consequences. According to non-profit organizations, at least 30 to 35 protesters have already been killed. If that number rises sharply, the likelihood of US or even Israeli involvement increases dramatically. Just last night, White House sources told Iran International that the United States would respond if the regime escalates its violence. That response does not necessarily mean troops on the ground. Recent history offers alternatives. In Libya, US air power alone was enough to tip the balance. Venezuela demonstrated another model: intelligence-driven operations without large-scale deployments. Experts suggest that US and Israeli intelligence penetration of Iran may already be deeper than the regime realizes, as demonstrated during the 12-day war and a series of highly targeted strikes. President Trump has consistently favored low-risk, surgical approaches rather than prolonged occupations. If intervention comes, it is likely to follow that pattern. For now, Iran stands at a crossroads. The protests are growing, the regime is panicking, and the world is watching closely. There is a lot unfolding and the situation is changing by the hour. If you want to stay updated as events develop, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Videos like this are often restricted or demonetized because modern platforms struggle with the realities of modern conflict. But the reality remains and it deserves to be documented. That is why independent platforms and viewer support matter more than ever. We are entering the most unpredictable phase of this uprising, and what happens now could reshape not just Iran, but the entire region. So if you want real, uncensored coverage of global conflicts, revolutions, and power struggles, not headlines, not propaganda, but what's actually happening, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching.